we're going to a different economy, and we're going to be learning more about that as we go. But clearly, we're learning that things can be done from remote locations. We're learning that technology can replace people even more than we thought.
We're not going back to the same economy. We're recovering, but to a different economy, and it'll be one that is more leveraged to technology. And I worry that that is going to make it even more difficult than it was for many workers.
In Silicon Valley, and my friends who work in technology know that what we did to the manufacturing workers, we are now going to do to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers, and then even bookkeepers, accountants, insurance agents, lawyers, and on through the economy. So
welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And guys, I come back with that video just to make you think. Now we have the rise and fall of great powers. That's what this video is called, from who? The Council of Foreign Relations. And if you have my book, you know how powerful the CFR is. And the reason why they're having this conversation, because we can clearly see that America to Babylon is ending and the rise of China is beginning. But this video actually breaks it down economically, militarily. The China leader saying there's no looking back. The C word, the pandemic, sped this up. We know China was given the technology from the United States, from every president since Reagan. I don't care who it is. We are seeing this plan unfold right in front of our eyes. So definitely, guys, this is going to be the most important video that you'll watch. Because the fact is that America is never going back to the power. It's never going back to having the global reserve currency, because as we can see, they're killing it right in front of our faces. They killed the economy with all the small businesses closing. That's your economy. Now we have the technology coming in, but who's in charge of the technology? Only a handful of our big corporations who have basically sold us down the drain to China, because we know all their businesses are over in China. So when we see the media beefing up these cyber attacks from China, we know all that is fake. It's all false, guys. All of our banks have agreements with China. I've done several videos on that on this actual channel, because they know what? There's billions of people rising out of poverty. Do you know how much money that's going to be for the corporations? And we know, what is this game about? Money and power. We know China is going to lead us into the fourth industrial revolution. But not only is China going to lead us into the fourth industrial revolution with the surveillance, social credit, robots, algorithms, AI, but also their currency. Because remember, when it comes to the New World Order, everything is planned out. Enjoy the rest of the video.
Kurt Sphalen, I'm the editor of Foreign Affairs. Today's lecture is in fact a discussion with the not exactly modest title, The Rise and Fall of Great Powers, America, China, and the Global Order. That's quite the question to grapple with. Over
some 30-odd years ago, it did not suggest that history had come to a full stop when the book came out. It rather suggested that history was moving on. And has it not moved on since late 1980s? A big factor, the one we're discussing chiefly today, the focus of so many other considerations and panels, etc., is how are we in the United States here, but across the global commons, how are we to understand another chapter in the rise and fall of great powers, namely the substantive, and I stress substantive, rise of China as a world power? Well, by whatever means we measure it, and we have some great panelists with us to help us measure it, whatever way we measure it, economic, military, strategic, political influence, there is a significant larger player and a larger presence on the world scene for the United States and the other powers around China, Russia, European Union, India to respond to. So it's China at the center of our debate, I think.
You and with Paul and Ray. And let me also just add my thanks to the Star Foundation and to Hank Greenberg and Florence Davis for all of their support of the Council and, frankly, their incredible support of the Asia Studies program over the past few decades. So to your point, yes, I think it's important to recognize this is a big year for China. It's the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. They're at the, beginning of their 14th five-year plan, and they're on the cusp of 2022, where they're going to have a leadership transition for the Communist Party. Of course, not any real mystery about who's going to come out on top. But the messaging, in this kind of year is naturally going to be very positive, very optimistic, and I'd say at this point it's veering on triumphal. Basically, the message is that the wind is at China's back. Coming out of the pandemic, China did fare the best economically of all the large economies. Xi Jinping, as you suggest, says that China is both, riding and driving the wave of globalization and technological innovation. There's a sense, I think, that, China is on the rise. It has Xi Jinping at the helm. The United States, in contrast, is viewed as, politically polarized, weak economically, and the message is that it has no chance of reclaiming its position as the world superpower. We've had 3 speeches by senior foreign policy officials, senior Chinese foreign policy officials over the past 2 months. They have said that they want to work with the United States. They want to find areas of cooperation, climate change, the pandemic, cyber terrorism. But that they expect the United States is going to redress all of the problems of the Trump administration, right? Going to sort of take care of the distorted view of China as a strategic competitor, take care of the fact that the United States does not respect China's core interests in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and take care of all the restrictions that it's placed on Chinese companies and media outlets and Confucius Institute. So I think what we hear from the Chinese leadership right now is a sense of, as I said, triumphalism with some lecturing thrown in, a little bit of openness and a faint undercurrent of concern. I do think it's important, though, to recognize that if you go one level down, right, so if you move sort of beyond the level of the topmost Chinese elite, that you do hear more openly expressed concern about the potential of the Biden administration to cause more problems for China than even the Trump administration did. I think there's worry that the Biden administration promises, in some respects, the worst of 2 worlds, that it will be just as tough on China as the Trump administration was, but it's also going to be more effective at reasserting leadership on the global stage, more effective at building coalitions, pushing back against China in places like the United Nations. I would just note that, in Cui Tiankai, who's the Chinese ambassador to the United States, in his speech last month, he talked about, he said, any U.S. effort to build a coalition in Asia to balance against China would fail, that it was basically like putting, old wine in a new bottle. But I think, anytime someone tells you that something's going to fail, you know that they're worried about it. So I do think it's important to recognize that there is concern about the Biden administration, that it will take what the Chinese had thought was really just an economic and technological competition and add a layer of values onto it. And finally, I think there's also just a little more humility among Chinese scholars and analysts in the sense that they recognize that China has caused some of its own problems, that it's alienated a lot of countries with its wolf warrior diplomacy, that there are problems in the Belt and Road Initiative, and that these may offer opportunities for the United States, to capitalize on.
In which you hit 0 interest rates. There's the printing of money, the creation of debt, and that has an impact and threatens a world reserve currency. So in that piece you describe the changing world order, which anyone, excuse me, I didn't silence my phone, so let me just shut that. Sorry. The changing world order, you can see this going back. It's on LinkedIn if anyone wants to read it, but you hit 0 interest rates. You can't stimulate in the normal way. The production of a lot of debt, and that has an effect on the reserve currency status and so on. And so I've studied over the last the 500 years, these three cycles of the rise of the Dutch and the Dutch guilder, which is the world reserve currency, the British pound, and so on. Those patterns that are existing today, with the production of debt necessary to stimulate the economy and the value of money, is number one. The second, which is related, is the size of the wealth gap, and with that, the size of the opportunity gap and the values gap and the political gaps. So that's the second factor, and it's very related. And the third is the rise of a great power to challenge an existing great power, China. The three things. They're very interrelated. And so when we're looking at the picture, I think we have to look at all three of those related, and they've repeated through history. Each one of those, I just use statistics to measure, like a health index. Each one of those is most analogous to the 1930s period. We can talk about what historical periods, but it goes back to prior to that. So there is an economic and capitalist cycle in which the boom creates debt and an overextension that reaches a limit. And that in turn, if you have this mix, if you have a lot of debt, and you have bad balances, and you have a big wealth gap and a big values gap, and you have an economic downturn, and you have a rise of a power challenging an existing power, you have internal conflicts and wars. So
in the Naval War College Review is something called China's Global Navy. It's a substantive 30-page piece with a lot of additional data, which makes me think, at least, and I'm sure will make many others think, it looks as if every year over the past 20, 30 years, China has just been launching another 10, 11, 12 or more modern ships to replace the older frigates and the older submarines and stuff in its navy. Every year it launches about 3 times more warships, than we do. Every year, the size of its navy and the capacity and destructive strength of its navy for asymmetric warfare against the biggest navy of all rises and rises and rises. So when we have rather warmer relations with China, they keep on building. And when we have rather soured relations with China, they keep on building. And then when we have a summit meeting in Hawaii or whatever, they keep on building. So there's something just eerily substantive and, I wouldn't say ominous, though you may think the word is ominous. It is attempting to shift the overall naval strategic balances of the world. And by my money and by the sort of authorship of so many pieces on the Chinese military expansion today, following on the economic expansion that Ray's describing, we are pretty close to talking about a rising contender for the number one position in world affairs.
If you have a bad financial situation and you have a lot of debt, so if income is less than your expenditures, and you have a bad balance sheet, and you have a lot of debt, and you have an economic downturn with a large wealth gap, that is the combustible combination that produces the problems. In the case of, I'm just trying to make the comparison with China. In China, besides their income statement and balance sheet being better, their living standards are rising. Since I've been going there. So there's contentment, there's excitement, there's happiness there. There's a large wealth gap, but that's when the living standards are rising. Per capita income, when I started going there since 1984, it's risen 22 times. The poverty rate has declined by 88. The life expectancy's increased by 10 years. So there is not discontent. There is a wealth gap that's analogous to us. It's top of mind, but the boat is rising. And so it's an environment in which there's enthusiasm in China more than there is the feeling here when you're having that decline and you have a debt to deal with it. So that's a big difference.